Howdy, and welcome to the Highline Herd podcast, where stories ride strong and the bond between folks and their horses runs deep. Each Sunday, we're talking everything from trail tips and tack to good old horse sense and the people who live it every day. Keep up with the herd by following us over on Instagram at the Highline Herd and swinging by our website at thehighlineherd.com. Now, let's ride into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Highline Herd. I'm Skylar.
And I'm Shelby. And today's episode is going to be quarantine, vaccines, and talking about strangles.
Yep.
All things we kind of talked about in a previous episode and said we would come back on to do a more in-depth discussion. So I'm going to let Skylar talk about quarantine first because she recently had to do a BLM level quarantine.
Yep. So when I first got sundown, and I think we touched base briefly about this in our last campfire session, but when I first got sundown, I had to quarantine him from my herd, which means I had to completely put him in a separate area. I decided I wanted to go all out. I didn't want any of the same clothing to come in contact with my other horses, any of the same tools, utensils, so like pitchforks, brushes, halters, lead ropes, buckets, all of it. I kept everything completely separate until 30 days was up because I didn't want to run the risk of him coming from an area with a lot of horses. And not only that, but horses who don't have testing really that's kept up to date. I just didn't want to risk it. So he and everything that he interacted with was completely separate. It even extended as far as like whips. I kept his whips out away. Nothing that he touched would go back into my barn without even just going in its own separate area. Like I had a pile of stuff right at the barn door entrance that I just left there to keep it out of the weather when it rained or snowed and all of that. And it's just a precaution that I have heard people talk about time and time again, not only because it helps keep your horses safe and your herd safe, but also the new horse that you bring in. It helps you monitor them and everything that, comes into contact with them and prevents transmission of a lot of dangerous diseases.
Yeah, when you're bringing in a new horse, quarantining them is definitely important, and the length of time can vary. Some horses only need like 2 weeks. Some horses need a full 30 days. It depends a lot on where they came from and personal preference. What do you want to do to be safe?
Exactly.
And the degree you take it to also is dependent on that. Because, if you're kind of familiar with where a horse came from, it was a good barn, a clean barn, they keep their horses up to date on the vaccines, you might want to keep them separate for the first 2 weeks, but you don't need to go so extreme as to limit clothing contact, whip contact, hose contact you should always, always, always limit outside of your own herd because that is one of the best ways to transfer diseases.
Yep.
Especially ones like strangles, which we'll discuss a little bit later. So, quarantine, the level of severity you go to truly depends on your situation and what you're dealing with.
And your facility, too, and how it's set up.
Yeah, which actually brings a really interesting point to the table. There are quarantine facilities. There are facilities you can ship horses to do the quarantine for you. Yeah. Which I think is more of a higher end thing.
Yeah, you see that a lot more in like show environments where there's high level eventing horses or showing horses.
Or imported horses.
Yeah, especially.
But, it is an option for everybody if you wanted to do that. I did recently a 2-week quarantine, but much like Skylar, I did the full kick and boodle. For the first, until I knew for sure what was going on with the horse, for the first week I made the rule, look, do not handle this horse before the other horses. Make him the last one you touch, pet, talk to, feed, whatever. Like, no contact. Because at the time, I recently got a new Project Horse Remedy, and where I got him from wasn't the most reputable place.
No.
And it wasn't the cleanest either.
Ugh.
He still had auction stickers on his butt. So, not knowing where he came from, what was going on with his skin, because his skin looked really funky when I got him. I wasn't going to risk carrying anything over to my herd. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I've got 5 other horses to think about. But I kept that severity up for only a week until after I gave him a bath and was able to actually really evaluate what I was looking at. And then it was just, I laxed up the quarantine and just kept him separate. I kept his feed stuff separate, his gear separate, but that was it. After I figured out what was going on with him, he just went to a week of solitary confinement, basically.
The worst thing.
It was good for him, because even after I got him back even after I integrated him into the herd, he wound up back onto solitary confinement for probably 2 or 3 more weeks because he wanted to go back to acting feral. Mm-hmm. So again, everything you do just determines your horses, and in our next episode we'll cover horse behavior and horse integration. Yeah, this episode's purely about quarantine and strangles and all of that. So, quarantine a new horse is something you should always do. Even if you have all the vet records saying they were vaccinated for all this stuff, whatever. Quarantine for at least a week is always a good idea, just to be safe.
Yes, and it'll also let you evaluate the horse as well before just throwing them out into pasture or throwing them in with your herd.
It'll give you a good idea of their personality and who they might meld with best. Yep. And 2, say you have a horse that came from Florida and you just hauled him up to Montana. Your environments are going to be a little bit different. Mm-hmm. It'll be good for your horse to acclimate to the environment before having to also deal with a herd.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that's where quarantine can also kind of be a little helpful. So
it's a good buffer.
it really can be. So yeah, quarantine is always a great place to start with new horses, whether you know where they came from or not. If you can get the vet records and have all their vaccines on hand, fantastic. If you can see what this horse was dewormed with and how he was handled, great. That gives you peace of mind and lets you know that you don't have to go through and do all of that.
Yeah.
But quarantine for a week at least is still a good idea.
Yeah. If you have the paperwork, great, but
it's always better to be safe than sorry. You never know. Horses can be asymptomatic carriers of something. So even if they've been vaccinated, even if they've had all the things done, they can be asymptomatic carriers.
Yeah, and then they could just pass it on.
Right, so. And you would never know.
Exactly.
So that kind of leads us into the strangles discussion a little bit. So we've talked about strangles several times because of the equine diseases. It is, in our opinion, one of the most dangerous because it is so contagious. The recovery is so hard on your horses, and they may not recover. It can turn fatal so quickly, and the level of quarantine you have to put the horse through with strangles is unmatched, I think.
I mean, it's so quick to spread, and that's what gets barns. Like, if one horse in a barn, a show barn, gets it, your whole show barn is potentially infected within days.
Because strangles can live on inanimate objects for, I think, depending on the environment, it can live up to like 2 weeks.
Hot minute. Yeah.
Yeah. Like in water buckets with active water in them, I think it can stay there for like 2 weeks and still be active enough to spread to any horse that drinks out of that water bucket. Yeah. So that means if a horse rubs his nose on the bars, on the wood of your stall, in the shavings, the pitchfork, whatever, everything that came into contact with that horse is now contaminated.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of break it down a little bit because we talked about just a little bit of how it's contagious and it's bad and all that, but like, what is it?
Yeah, the symptoms vary. I've heard some horses present with very mild symptoms. They may have swollen lymph nodes, a little bit of discharge, some coughing, and that might be it. But there's also horses who get they're basically like pustules, I guess.
Yeah.
Like big, ugly, weeping sores sometimes, paired with a lot of discharge, a lot of coughing. Their lymph nodes can actually swell to the point they have trouble breathing.
Well, the disease itself is just basically like strep throat in horses. It's a bacterial infection.
Strep throat, chickenpox, like, it's very similar to those two. And I honestly, in terms of, you know, contagion, spreadability, it's pretty darn close. It's probably worse, yeah. So, and just a quick aside, like, when you are quarantine horses, when you do have one with a disease, make sure you know how to sterilize everything, because chances are you're going to have to.
Yeah.
Because there are things besides... Strangles is the most common, yes, but there are other diseases that can live on inanimate objects for a hot minute.
Mm-hmm.
So, strangles can, you know, jump from anything. Contaminate equipment, horse to horse, water, and you most often see it between horses of 6 to 10 years of age, but those horses have the best recovery rate.
Mm.
And the reason I think you probably see it in horses in that age range is because those are the horses that travel the most.
Yeah.
Those are your show horses, your hardcore trail horses, your rodeo horses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because usually by about... Stallions usually are put to... kept home after they've proven themselves, which could be 7 years old, could be 10 years old, and they won't travel again. So this is a disease that is more common among show horses, traveling horses, but any horse can get it.
Yeah.
The only time they can't is similar to, like, leprosy. You can get the antibodies, and then you're not going to catch it again as long as you have those antibodies. Strangles is very similar. If the horse has the antibodies because they've survived a previous episode, they're not going to suffer from the disease quite as much as a horse that's never had it.
Well, and there's a lot of people that say that the older horses sometimes don't show as much symptoms as well. So they're still affected by the disease, but they might not have as big of a reaction to it. And so sometimes that can be harder to catch.
And that's the thing, too, you have to consider. Some horses are really stoic.
Yeah.
And older horses can definitely be very, very stoic. Mm-hmm. So that's where you really just have to be attentive, have to have eyes on, have to know your horse. Because just because you have a list of symptoms doesn't mean that that's the only way a disease is going to present.
No.
A great example is ulcers. People think of ulcers as they're girthy, they cow kick, and they bite.
That's not always true.
It's not. My experience with ulcers was would not load a trailer, spooky as all get out, and then the final straw was a hardcore rodeo level bronc episode. But that bronc episode was a out of nowhere almost result. Because the other symptoms were so, quote unquote, mild.
Yeah.
So that is just about, you know, it comes down to knowing your horse. Knowing, you know, how they behave. Which, if you're getting in a new horse, you won't know all of that.
Yeah.
They may be super lethargic and lazy and blah, 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 and always have a little bit of discharge. Because, you know, horses are prone to allergies just like we are, dust irritation, and you may pass off symptoms as... something
that you think is minute and
right,
not an issue.
Know, shipping fever, allergies, something like minor, and it could, next thing you know, all your entire barn is.
Yeah. So quarantine helps in that aspect of being able to just watch, monitor, make sure your horse is good, and making sure your other horses are good as well. You gotta keep them safe.
Quarantine is definitely, yes, it can be a hassle, especially depending on your setup, but ultimately it comes down to this. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I would rather spend $100 now to keep my herd safe than spend thousands upon thousands of trying to deal with something potentially life-threatening later.
Yeah.
Because honestly, if I had a strangles case, I don't have the setup to deal with it. My horse would have to do a layover at OSU or Rood and Riddle or some other facility until they recover, which takes that expense and triples it.
Yeah, overnight vet oh
Yeah.
goodness, it's a different world.
It is, especially depending on what they have to do. And like for strangles, because of the labor intensity of the labor intensive quarantine that has to be undertaken.
Yeah. And all the precautionary that has to go into like what you're wearing and cleaning up and desanitize, like all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, like well and truly, when we say strangles is like one of the most contagious things horses can get, we mean it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even hardly look at a horse with strangles and without passing it to the horse next to him. Like it's bad.
Yeah.
And that leads us a little bit into the Coggins. So you hear people say all the time, shots and Coggins, shots and Coggins. And I know we've covered Coggins before, but I thought it would be actually kind of interesting to say what Coggins is, because I don't think a lot of people do.
No, like I know come last year, I didn't actually know what it was. I just knew it was a piece of paper that said your horse doesn't have Coggins.
your horse doesn't have this disease, therefore this horse can cross state lines.
Exactly.
Can be at showing facilities,
Yeah.
trail places, campsites. So when it is actually fully legal, and they will, do not cross state lines and be like, oh, they might. No, they will pull you over if they see you with horses from out of state.
Mm-hmm.
And they will demand to see a negative Coggins.
Mm-hmm.
When I hauled up to Indiana recently, no, I didn't get pulled over, but I was fully prepared to be pulled over because I have Ohio plates on my trailer and my truck. I had 2 horses, very obviously, because I pull a stock in my trailer. Mm-hmm. I was fully prepared to be pulled over and questioned about these horses and their Coggins. So when you're traveling across state lines with horses, when you're going anywhere new with horses, make sure you have a negative Coggins on hand. This is part one of those things that is asymptomatic but contagious.
Yeah.
So Coggins is EIA, and what EIA is equine anemia. It is 100% fatal in horses that are symptomatic. It is extremely contagious. Like, you can't have horses on the same property as a horse with a positive Coggins. Kind of contagious. Whereas, like, strangles, you could share the property, given equipment and clothing and everything was separated. Mm-hmm. EIA can be transmitted by flies or mosquitoes. So, it is incredibly deadly. It is one thing they are trying to wipe out, I think, from the horses as much as possible. Hence why you cannot take a horse to auction without a negative Coggins. Yeah. And auctions are one of the sketchiest places you can take a horse.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't go anywhere camping or trail riding at a facility and without like providing documentation saying my horse does not have this. It's even shows, especially just like you said, like they're huge on this.
I've been to several shows and showgrounds, and if you do the online registration, they require proof of a negative Coggins. Mm-hmm. They require you to upload the document. When you pull into the fairgrounds or the showgrounds, they may be standing at the gate catching everybody who pulls in to be like, all right, Coggins. Because it is also a massive liability if they don't. Yeah.
Because it can come back on any facility that doesn't check for things like that. Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking about hosting events or having any type of horse-related thing go on, this is something that you will definitely want to keep in mind and either have like liability forms, but also have somebody checking that or scanning them, taking photos of the physical paperwork and what horse is there and what horse isn't. All of that is just super essential to planning and protecting yourself from anything that might happen.
Yeah, Coggins it's an anemia thing and it is nasty. You don't want your horse to get it, and it can be transferred as easily as strangles. So just like any facility should, don't go somewhere that doesn't require negative Coggins before checking in. Yeah. And while I do think most places should require a strangles vaccine as well, they're probably not going to.
No.
So just make sure your horse is vaccinated. At the end of the day, the only vaccine required for most places is the negative Coggins report. Mm-hmm. That's the only like vet required thing. Now, boarding facilities, training facilities can require a vaccine list, but you would usually have that ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
They would usually either have it on their website or send you an email ahead of time.
Yeah, and that's also a good rule of thumb to kind of gauge if a event or a show is legit, is if they ask and require you to give that documentation saying, no, my horse does not have this. Good example of it, we did a parade in our town, and the organizers of said parade did not require anybody to show identification and vet work for their horses not having it. And that turned me off completely from any future events. I'm like, none of these horses are being checked.
Right,
and it's dangerous.
Pair it with the fact that a couple of those horses didn't even look completely healthy.
No, and had just been from auction.
Yeah.
It was just not a good situation to put anybody in.
No, and it's not fair either. So when you are going places, yeah, make sure they require a negative contents report and make sure your horse is thoroughly vaccinated. Mm-hmm. At minimum, 5 weigh-in strangles.
Yep.
And you know what? I'm going to touch on this because I keep seeing people on social media and it's driving me up the wall. The rabies vaccine exists for a reason.
Yes.
If your vet recommends a rabies vaccine, please give your horse the vaccine.
Your vet is more aware of what goes on in the area and how many rabies cases there are than you are. Trust them.
Not only that, but rabies is 100% fatal 100% of the time. And it can turn the most docile horse into a bloodthirsty maniac who will kill itself trying to get to you or the other animals.
It's very hard to watch an animal go from one extreme to the other. There's plenty of videos out online if you are interested in seeing to know and understand the extent of how difficult it is.
There was an article a couple of months ago. This owner didn't vaccinate his horse, and this vet who knew this horse for I think it was 20 years or something, had to watch this horse deteriorate to the disease.
And they didn't know what it was at first. So they were doing all this testing, and then the horse got progressively more violent, and they actually did document and record kind of what was happening to the horse, and you can watch that all yourself. And it was brutal. It was horrible.
And here is also a very gruesome but important reminder I think people forget. If there is any question in a professional's mind that your horse has rabies, they are legally allowed to detain your horse and euthanize them, because the only way to test for rabies is to decapitate them and check their brain.
Yep.
That is the only way to test for rabies. Mm-hmm. This is not something your animal goes away for a few days and comes back from.
No, it is they are gone for good. There is no coming back from rabies.
There is none. There is no cure, but there is also no reason that it should still exist among domesticated animals.
The only reason it does exist is because of pure negligence.
Yes. When my vet came out for fall shots, which she doesn't normally do, but, circumstances just laid out, she was already out at my farm. And she looked at me and said, "Do you want to go ahead and do rabies on your 3? And I went, "Yep." No hesitation.
Yeah.
Part of that is because I trust my vet, and if she recommends something, I will do it 9 times out of 10. Mm-hmm. But also, I don't play with rabies.
No, it's not one you should.
It's not. And honestly, I've seen the progression of that disease. I know how horrible it is, and knowing the testing required, why would I risk it when I know the vaccine
it ends all that?
Yeah. I don't know the exact statistics, so I'm not going to claim to know them. But I can tell you, your animal's chances of catching rabies are slim to none if you vaccinate them. Mm-hmm. However, if you do not vaccinate them and you live in a rural area, like you typically do when you have horses, you're going to have your horses exposed
in some way, shape, or form
to wildlife.
Yeah.
Either directly or indirectly, which is how horses usually acquire EPM, is through indirect contact with feces. Mm-hmm. Same thing with rabies.
Yeah. That's something I have to explain to a lot of people is like the wildlife in the area. Pay attention to it. We just had on our farm a possum just wandering about all over our farm. It's on all of our trail cams, all of our outdoor cameras, everything.
Part of why I mentioned it is I'm seeing a whole bunch of people on social media like shocked that their animals are getting rabies, but I've also noticed that rates seem to be up this year for it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's negligence of people not vaccinating, therefore allowing the disease to spread, or if we've just had the right weather and temperature that it's just a little more active right now.
I don't know. But it's just something we need to talk about, and we need to spread the word, like, get your animals vaccinated. Old Yeller. Get somebody to watch Old Yeller. Gosh, that'll mess you up.
Because
hard.
That is unfortunately the way it has to go.
Yes.
There is
no other way.
None. And it doesn't matter for humans either. There is no cure for humans, except we don't have the gift of euthanasia to save us from the descent.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah. So the biggest takeaway from this episode really should be quarantine your horses to be safe. If you do not have vet records about previous vaccinations,
assume there are none.
Yep. That's exactly what I did with my latest project horse.
Yep.
He got all of his shots and then boosters because my vet agreed. She said, yep, we're going to treat him like a baby then. If we don't have vaccine records, we're going to treat him like a baby, and he's going to get multiple rounds of shots until he's caught up.
Yep.
And I don't play with that.
Yeah. No, it's not something you should.
No, there are too many things that are preventable now that can be pretty much wiped out through modern medicine. Why would I take the risk?
It's not worth it.
It's not.
No.
And my horses, travel. Valor more than anybody, but when you have even one horse that travels, he can still bring something in when he comes home.
Yep.
Even if he is asymptomatic.
Or if you're hauling or let somebody borrow your trailer, the horses that they put in there, they could have something. And then the next time you put your horses in there, they could get something. It's all just so easy to spread, so easy to, interchange between different barns and horses and people and all of that. And there's ways to prevent it. So take those precautions to prevent it.
There is absolutely no reason to risk a lot of these diseases.
No.
Give your horse strangles vaccines. Make sure you have a negative Coggins before you go anywhere. If you're buying a horse from a private seller, you can add that into the deal. That this horse must have negative Coggins before money exchanges hands.
Yeah.
Every horse I've bought, aside from Remedy, that is what I required to come with them. Remedy was a unique case, but again, I took quarantine with him very, very seriously. So, all things to think about is how preventable a lot of this stuff is through just careful monitoring, careful husbandry, and just attentiveness. So, biggest things, vaccinate your horses, be very aware of where you take them and how those places approach horses, whether they ask for a negative Coggins or not, whether you're moving into a new barn and they require vaccine records. If I'm moving into a new barn and they don't ask to see my vaccine records, I'm not moving into that barn. And vaccinate for rabies, please.
Yeah. We're begging you, please. Help us and help everybody else around you keep this disease from spreading, because it is preventable.
It is, and it is rabies is an ugly, ugly disease to watch take hold.
Yeah.
And, people always talk about how, Alzheimer's is terrible to watch among family members.
And rabies is horrible.
Yeah. 10 times worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, a little bit heavier episode, I guess, but very important things I don't think are talked about very much. Or maybe just not thought about. I don't know if it's something people just don't think about, because to those of us that have been doing it for years, it's kind of second nature. And, when people are at a boarding facility, the barn manager may handle it. But these are things, if you are a horse owner, whether you are in full care board or have your horses on your own property, these are things you have to consider. So, vaccinate your horses, quarantine your horses, have up-to-date vet records on hand and ready to go.
That's basically it.
Yep.
So we hope you enjoyed this episode and you learned something from it. If you have, feel free to comment. If there's anything that you want us to go into detail more, we can. Just let us know. But we'll see you next week. We hope you enjoyed this week's topic. Join us for new episodes every Sunday. And to keep up with the herd, be sure to follow us on Instagram at the Highline Herd and visit our website at thehighlineherd.com. We hope you enjoy the show. See you next week.